thank you for joining us this morning. I think I speak for us all on the call when I say we're very grateful you sharing your time and also your views and opinions. Right, let's get stuck into talking about the evolution of Christmas appeals. I'd like to start by reflecting on the fact that for decades, the British Red Cross and Crisis have been famous for their winter appeals. On the one hand, you've got British Red Cross, whose incentive-led fundraising most people here will have received in some form. Indeed, a lot of it came from our studio at Consider. Coasters, Christmas cards, wrapping paper, the Snowman Partnership, you name the incentive, the Red Cross tested it. And I'm pretty sure I won't be the only one here today who's got a Red Cross pen hanging around in the drawer. And then you have Crisis at Christmas, born in 1967. And with the launch of their Reserve a Place proposition in 2009, it's clear that festive fundraising is firmly in their DNA. But in recent years, both BRC and Crisis have evolved, moving away from this tried and tested, more traditional Christmas fundraising and seeing huge success in the process. So what's going on? Tom, I'm going to come to you first. You're welcome. Give us the inside track here. How has the British Red Cross evolved its Christmas fundraising in recent years? And what came after that incentive-led approach that you were so famous for? Why was that?
Yeah, I think to start with the why, I think is there are a couple of things in it. So one, there certainly our sort of environmental approach. We were stuffing ever more incentives into packs, and we really wanted to sort of minimize the environmental impact on that side, and that's one of the drivers. But also, and I'm sure many people have seen this, seeing declining returns from that approach as well. So we really wanted to change that approach to be more about building connection and loyalty with people rather than using that sort of that incentivized approach to which was often delivering us maybe some really good response rates, but at very low value and really, maybe people not connecting really with the Red Cross and supporting us again in future. So that was why we wanted to change, and I guess we replaced that with two big things, two sort of things I talk about. One is a real shift in our tone of voice, and that's something that's really changed in our fundraising over the last few years. I wouldn't credit myself with that. I think Rebecca Shaw in our team and Pally McCallie, who's recently left, really driven the charge on that. And one of the things we do is really just look at like what realities are facing our teams out in the field. What's happening to British Red Cross's work, and what are the needs that we have as an organisation, and trying to really bring that through to our supporters. Also wanting to be more reactive and relevant to what's going on in the external environment. So not sort of planning and setting exactly what we're going to talk about 10 months in advance, but having a process where we're able to do that as late as possible. So we're really talking about what's going on in our supporters' worlds as well, and what they're seeing in the news and what they're interested in. And that's been really important. And I think underlying all of that as well is still something that will be true across all of the appeals that you all do, is the importance of that strong emotional connection and the really strong reason to give in there, which you just can't not have. But we add it with those other elements. And I think then sort of on top of that as well, then we've shifted to integrating more across everything we're doing during Q4. So whether that's our digital, our warm and our cold print, TV, so that we've got that sort of consistent message and tone across everything we're doing. So it supports all of our fundraising at that time of year. So that's kind of how we've changed and why we've changed.
Thanks, Tom. That's great. Ben, just to come back to Tom's point about bringing in the emotional connection, you've led creative development for several of British Red Cross's New Look winter appeals. In your opinion, what does the approach with those appeals mean for the charity sector?
All right, I'm probably going to echo quite a lot of what Tom has just said. But firstly, I think one of the key things for me about the way that we've worked with the British Red Cross over the past couple of years is that it's really demonstrated what a proper partnership can achieve when you work together. we've worked with Tom and the team on a bunch of different projects over the past couple of years, and that's given us the chance to chat to loads of people within the British Red Cross. That's helped us to get under the skin of the way that they do things and all of the different challenges that they face. And I cannot stress this enough, very often it's the chats that you have with the clients or with the ops person over a coffee that ends up unlocking that real nugget that shows through in the creative. In terms of other lessons for the sector, I think, as Tom mentioned, the clarity of the ask is super, super important. At the start of every project that we work on with Tom and the team, we've got a really clear idea of why we need to be asking for money right now. And the thing is, that's often much pointier than it's Christmas and we always ask for money at Christmas. That might sound quite obvious, but it's also quite rare. And I think really delving into that and understanding this year the impact that rising costs were having on the charity's ability to operate, it gave the appeal a real power. And to Tom's point about capturing tone of voice, I think there's a couple of things there as well. The first is the importance of authenticity, and this particularly applies to things like DM, where we've worked really hard to capture the voice of a real person. In the warm mailing last year, we had the head of ops talking about the stuff that was keeping them awake at night. I think that showed a real vulnerability, and we really, by really leaning into that, I think we created something that felt quite special. I think finally, and kind of related to that, just having a bit of a license to break or at least to bend some of the established rules of direct mail really helps you to capture that authenticity. So this feels less like a set of tried and tested techniques that fit to a template, and more like a letter from a real person with a real kind of hinterland and real concerns as well. I think sort of summing it all up, it really does boil down to one thing, and that's just being honest about why you need the money and framing that in as human and authentic a way as possible.
Thanks, Ben. Charlotte, can I bring you in maybe to comment on some of those points Ben was saying? I'd imagine you've got something to say, but specifically to frame it, what came after Reserve a Place? Why did Crisis make that shift at Christmas? And have you learnt similar things, for example?
Yeah, there were a couple of reasons why we moved away from Reserve a Place. So it all started off with COVID. Our traditional model was very much day centres, and people were reserving a place for someone to have Christmas lunch, along with lots of good stuff with the charity, lots of advisors. That's moved on to more of a hotel model now. So, and we see a much bigger impact on our members by bringing them in somewhere safe for a minimum of 3 weeks. The hotels run between 3 and 5 weeks. We see much better outcomes for our members. So it's moved away a little bit from that Reserve a Place day centre. And our new model is to bring them in and then work with a lot of our advisors to get them on a plan out of homelessness for good. Because of that, we moved away from Reserve a Place to more to a different proposition. One of the big things that we knew made Crisis unique is the unique price point. People are used to seeing £28 something or £29 something from Crisis. That's calculated based on how much it costs to help one person out of homelessness for good. That pricing switched away from just Christmas to more of a year-round support price point. So we're talking about how we can help people on their journey out of homelessness. Referring to Ben's point about the emotional connection, that was really important for us. We know that a lot of people like Crisis because they're one-to-one model, and they like to pay for one person or multiple people to receive help at Christmas. So we knew that keeping storytelling at the heart of our campaign and keeping our price point and being really tangible about what that price point is going to provide someone would be really important. So that's how we've kind of ended up with Life Beyond Homelessness, our proposition, and fundraising. We talk about the first day, so the first day that someone receives support at Christmas, and then where it goes from there.
Yeah, it's a lovely new proposition. Thanks, Charlotte. Megan, you and Charlotte working together on a lot of this. From a media perspective, though, how have you seen Christmas fundraising evolve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a key thing that we've definitely had over the past few years is the use of econometric modelling and how that's implemented on media planning. So obviously it sort of is a fantastic way to prove sort of real worth and attribution methods of different channels. And what we've definitely seen is that digital is a really key player in Christmas campaigns and will be moving forwards. Like I'm very much a digital person, but I am going to say digital is growing and always will be. So it is something that's really crucial to sort of ensure that you're looking at moving forwards, and something we've really been working on with Crisis in terms of integrating planning. So, you know, we've got a fantastic offline team, a fantastic AV team, a digital team, and we all work together to make sure that this campaign is hitting those points in line with econometric modelling as much as possible. And that's something we've developed really closely with Crisis over the past few years. Sort of in line with that as well is making sure things like owned, earned, shared and paid are a really core part of our strategy. So making sure that we're leveraging points from things that are happening in the outside world. And I know we're coming into this, so I won't steal anyone's points, but making sure that we're hitting moments, hitting tangibility within the media, and making sure that everything's looping together. You know, if we've got an email campaign going out, Crisis communicates that to us so that we can make sure that we're mirroring things in paid search. And that integrated planning is something that has been really key to the evolution of Christmas fundraising from a media perspective recently.
Okay. So we've got clarity of ask, we've got tone of voice, we've got naturally digital is playing a key role here. Is there any, do you want to expand a little bit on econometric modelling, Megan? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So econometric modelling is essentially a maths modelling based attribution system. So what we can do is you take things like baselines and sort of media outputs, competitor activity, it all gets put into a big model. And essentially what it comes out is the sort of the attributed real value of different media channels. So for example, we all know that PPC comes out fantastically on all performance because it's last click, it's, you know, it's taking off. Basically, all you're above the line, people go and then search, for example, for Crisis, but actually they've seen a TV ad, they've seen this ad, they've seen that ad. It's not essentially always an attributable fare to PPC. What econometrics would do, for example, in this situation, it would say, okay, well, the actual real value of PPC is this, because actually you're not attributing anything to out of home, which had this impact or this impact. So this is a very much a sort of, the econometrics team will do this in far more detail, but that's sort of my understanding of it, is that's how it would work. It's a real attribution system for your channels that you can't necessarily measure in other ways.
Thank you. Properly put you on the spot there, didn't I? To
no problem. I hope I did justice.
channel your back end programmatic. Thanks a lot for that. Obviously, appeals have evolved enormously. Charlotte, there is a question which I wasn't going to take now, but I think seeing as we're in the moment and we've got a couple of minutes before we move on. Specifically for you, have you tested different price points when moving from reserve a place to a year-round support, i.e. a lower price point of £10 gives a person X, a higher price point of £50 gives a person Y? If you have, what insights do you have for this? Do you find that the higher price points perform better at Christmas?
Yeah, absolutely. We do test different price points. So we go out initially, do some audience testing. Obviously, cost of living crisis has really hit a lot of supporters hard. Our core demographic isn't as affected by that. So we have kept with the main appeal price point just under £30. But what we have introduced more recently is a secondary product, Christmas stocking, where we test lower price points. So that starts from as low as £5. And we give those younger audiences, those newer audiences, or people that are feeling the squeeze, a real opportunity to make an impact on the campaign. So that's where we've been testing. Thanks,
Charlotte. We're going to talk about Christmas stocking.
We are, so I'm trying not to...
in a minute, aren't we? Speaking, before we move on to innovation. But thank you very much for the question, by the way, whoever asked that. And panel, if you've got nothing else to add, I'll move the discussion on to our next talking point around innovation, okay? I suppose anyone who's tried to innovate with their Christmas appeals knows that it's something of a double-edged sword, right? So on the one hand, you often have some of your biggest budgets to play with, and in an ever more crowded marketplace, finding ways to stand out, whether that's on devices, doorsteps, press, is essential. But at the same time, it can feel like all eyes in the organization are on your campaign, right? And the pressure to deliver a significant proportion of the year's IG income can leave sometimes little room for innovation. So how do we reconcile that? Fortunately, I know our panelists have a track record of doing things slightly differently at Christmas, and no doubt have some views on where the best opportunities for innovation are. With that in mind, Megan, I'm going to come first to you with this one. How did the Kite Factory approach last year's Christmas appeals differently? And when it comes to digital tools and channels, what innovations have proved most effective?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of kind of digital stuff, it's all developing so rapidly, right? Which is why it's very exciting to work in digital, because you constantly have new things to test. Something that we're seeing increasingly prevalent in terms of innovation is that machine learning piece. So last year, for example, we were testing things like Advantage Plus audiences on Facebook, Performance Max, AI-driven tools on display. And actually what we saw is these are working really well now. I think some people can be a bit skeptical because sometimes Facebook or Google can push things and you don't know whether that's right for your campaigns. But we sort of, especially with Advantage Plus on Facebook, which is really quite a broad audience that you can put in there, and you really sort of let the machine and the algorithms do the work in terms of like finding those people, it really comes out with fantastic results that we saw last year. The same with Performance Max. We saw really, really strong results on Google from that. So that would be, in terms of innovation, what we were looking to push last year, and something that we'll continue to push, because actually we see really good successes with those sort of AI machine learning tools. We obviously sort of balance it out. It's always testing, and it's not going to work for everybody, and it's not going to work on all clients the same, but it's definitely something that was worth testing on your campaigns.
That's really interesting. And no doubt something that's going to expand in. If we were running this next year, I'd imagine it would be a slightly different conversation. Tom, how does what Megan has said sit with you from your side? Is British Red Cross having these discussions around evolving digital tools, not necessarily just machine learning? And how have you built innovation in a wider sense, perhaps, into your winter appeals?
Yeah, thank you. I think certainly we've been trialing some of the AI tools as well, similar ones that you mentioned, Megan, the Advantage Plus and PMax. I think we've seen some good initial signs from them. Our digital fundraising team are fantastic in looking out at what opportunities there are and where we can push and test and drive performance. So that's something we're kind of doing all year round, but certainly did towards the end of last year and at Christmas as well. And I think in that line, we test new channels as well, and have tested new channels at Christmas. But also we've gone out with new products and new creative. So and I think we're always in that situation that you've mentioned as well, Ian, where it is that such pressure to raise money and use what we know is working, but also we know we need to evolve. And yes, we do have that. We do have that bigger budget to play with at that time. So I think what we try to do when we've done it best is try things before Christmas, right? So can we get a test out? Is there a live test we can do? If there isn't a live test, are there any tools that we can use to get some initial insight? So we might use YouGov surveys or VoxPopMe, which is a great tool where you can send something to people and they'll do a quick 5-minute video giving you their reflections. You can choose the audience. Some of the lower budget options might be we'd go out to just a small portion of supporters through email, for example, or speak to people in the organization that meet the target audience. I've been tapped on the shoulder a number of times for being the parent audience and getting my feedback on products. So those are all the kind of things we try to do before Christmas. And I think, during Christmas, one of the things that is like a lot harder to try, and one of the things we went out with a couple of products last year, is anything around gifting, right? Because the spike is just so much greater around Christmas. So we do as much of that pre-testing as we can, but sometimes we just need to go for it. And one of the things we've done to de-risk that, I'd say, is really focusing on an audience that isn't our core fundraising audience at Christmas, where we're bringing a new product forward. It's a new product for an audience that we might not have something for anyway. So, for example, last year we launched our redeemable gift card in stores in Tesco nationwide. And that was really looking to connect with the with a younger audience, much more interested in sustainable fashion and gifting essentially, and not really overlapping with our core audience. So that's one of the ways we did it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Tom. Charlotte, speaking of gifting, we've already mentioned Christmas stocking slightly, but it comes to mind obviously as a winning innovation from recent times at Crisis. Could you tell us a bit more about it, possibly in the context of what Tom was saying as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Really similar to Tom, we're often testing new products and new technology and stuff early on before the build up to Christmas or in the lead up. We have a fantastic innovation team here at Crisis. And 2 years ago, they tested this new Christmas stocking product. So the idea was that we wanted to have those lower price points to go out to people that were still stackable. We see a lot of people liking to put multiple price points or gifts together. Perhaps something for a slightly younger audience. So kind of hitting that young family, 35 to 55 age bracket. And yeah, we put it out to test, see if it was a minimum viable product, and it performed really, really well. People loved it. It was kind of a gamified product, so it was looking a bit more at our digital and tech, and making it a slightly different way to gift. Not only gift, but give as well. So a lot of our supporters do gift the Christmas stocking. And we have on the confirmation email, we've got like a fun certificate that people can put in a real stocking for their children to say that they've gifted products to someone experiencing homelessness. So that product did really, really well. It then moved into my team and it's now a core part of our Christmas offering. So we've scaled that up over the last 2 years and seen real success. We're often testing other opportunities. So 2 years ago, when the cost of living was really high, we tested a sort of not quite regular giving product, but we allowed people to split that £30 main price point into 3, just so it felt a bit more manageable to give £10 a month for 3 months rather than £30 in one hit. That was another innovation product that we might be looking at how we can set up more of a regular giving offering in our Christmas mix moving forward. So we're always looking at ways to test those price points, as the question earlier, and reach new audiences as well.
Yeah, that last point seems particularly smart given the current economic climate, right? And we're back to reacting to what supporters want. Thanks for that, Charlotte. Ben, a question on this for you, well, 2 parts really. I'm curious to hear your perspective on innovation in the sector at large, but how would you advise charities approach testing and innovating over Christmas personally? How could they use this moment to try new things?
I think the key thing on the latter is just making sure that you've got your process right, that you're clear about what it is that you're looking to learn, and you're not taking risks just because it's a time of year when all eyes are on you. I thought Tom, Charlotte, and Megan all raised some really interesting points. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that they mentioned around pre-testing, just a little build on that. Christmas is the moment everybody's looking to. It's the reason why loads of people are here chatting about it in March today. But Christmas doesn't need to be an isolated moment. There's going to be loads of stuff that you can be learning from your year-round programs as well. And maybe your year-round programs don't have quite as much pressure on them as this one moment in the year when everybody's giving. I think the second thing, and maybe this aligns to Megan's points around attribution, is you don't just need to be looking at your Christmas appeal as a fundraising moment alone, but a time of year when people are going to be thinking about and talking about giving to charity and maybe even about your cause. So there are going to be loads of little things that you could be doing around Christmas that build a bit of a buzz around your campaign, whether that's making sure that your organic activity is integrated with the appeal, or looking at Christmas as a way to engage artists, ambassadors, shoppers, if you're in the retail space, or even corporates. Alignment and integration at Christmas is something that the entire organization, can contribute to. And the more aligned everybody is, the more likelihood there is of people actually noticing what you're doing.
Yeah, great point. There's a couple of questions which feel really poignant to exactly where we're at whilst talking about innovation. coming back a little bit to machine learning and AI. So thank you for the question. Somebody's asking here, Megan, Tom, but I think there's probably maybe for Charlotte as well, for using audience groups with Performance Max and Advantage Plus. Do you test these audience groups versus your normal audience targeting at the same time to make it a robust test? I'd imagine so. Or do you test these AI audiences sets in smaller campaigns throughout the year and see what happens? It's a good question. Thank you.
I'd say a bit of both, to be honest. Yeah, so we'll always have sort of different testing matrices on the go. So making sure that, you know, for optimization purposes, etc., we'll have a sort of a wealth of audiences there to ensure that we're hitting all the right people at the right time in line with our planning. But yeah, as sort of Tom and Ben have said, we're always pre-testing. Crisis has, you know, year-round activity. Other charities have year-round activity, and we will be making sure that actually throughout the year, we are generating those learnings so we can scale up for Christmas. It's very rare that we would go into something first time ever at Christmas without having tested it on a smaller scale before. It's likely a larger scale at Christmas because it can be a larger scale. But yeah, we'll always make sure that we're doing a combination of the both to make sure we're hitting exactly what we want to hit.
Great. Tom, did you have any points around this one as well?
Yeah, nothing to really add to that. It's similar for us to say really that we will try and do as robust a test as possible, essentially. But you know, in as much as that is possible with the platforms that we've got as well. So yeah, it's often a difficult decision as to how much you put over to that test as well, particularly at those big times. So as Megan's talking about, doing that at smaller times when you're expecting to spend less is certainly a good move.
Thanks, Tom. And just finally, Charlotte, I wondered if you had anything to add, not necessarily critical, but
No, I think it's all been covered.
Thank you. There's a couple of other questions. I really appreciate seeing these. This is great. I am going to save a couple of them for the end, just in the interest of covering our last question. But these are great. No, I can't resist. Have you used, this was, I'll leave it to you guys to scrabble who takes this one, but have you used TikTok for fundraising asks at Christmas? If so, is there any insight on using TikTok? Are there any other platforms you've tested other than Meta, Google, and YouTube that may work well?
Charlotte, do you want to go first?
Shall I go? Yeah, sure. So yeah, we tested TikTok for the first time last year. We tested it with our main appeal, which our main appeal, the main audience for that is 55 plus, and TikTok, it didn't perform particularly well, but we obviously then brought in this new stocking product. So we thought, that might be a better product to test. It's a slightly more engaging product as well because of the nature of it. It's a lot more solution focused than need focused. So we thought we could have a bit of fun with the content on TikTok, and that had a bit more of a chance to kind of go viral and reach people through the algorithm there. So TikTok performed much better this year. It shows real promise for stocking. A challenge for us is getting the content right. You can't just kind of use your Meta ads and hope that they're going to work on TikTok. It needs to be much more organic in its production. It needs to it just needs to be right for the platform. So one particular ad that did really well for us was with one of our celebrity ambassadors, Will Poulter, who had a day at our warehouse. He was helping to pack things, so it worked perfectly for our stocking ask. And our organic social team went and filmed some content just on their phones to make it look really sort of native to the platform. And that performed really well. It was the right ask, it was the right content, and it was the right audience. So yeah, we've seen success with it in that.
Yeah, super tangible as well.
Absolutely, keeping it tangible, yeah.
Megan, Tom?
Yeah, I'd sort of, obviously it's the same campaign in terms of this, but yeah, we would say, especially we've seen across lots of our clients that TikTok creative is so crucial to get right. And as Charlotte said, you can't take something that's running really well on, say, like Instagram stories and put it onto TikTok. It's such a different atmosphere across the two channels. Something that we see time and time again is that the fatigue on TikTok is also really quick. So it's very, very trend driven in a way that other social channels aren't. So you can put a video on TikTok and within 2 weeks, you're likely going to have seen a downward trajectory in terms of reactions, video views, etc. And that's nothing to do with potentially the creative. It might be doing really well on Instagram, but on TikTok, it just moves so quickly and it's having to keep up with those trends. As Charlotte said, you don't need to look polished on TikTok. And actually, the less polished you look is sometimes the better, because people want authenticity. They want to feel like they're not watching an ad on TikTok. So that's sort of, in terms of creative, that's what we've seen do really well. In terms of other channels that essentially we've seen do well across Christmas campaigns, a big one that we're watching is connected TV in line with YouTube. That's really growing. There's things like Amazon Prime, Netflix, they're sort of growing these subscription services as well that can be bought programmatically. And actually that's a really big space in terms of people who are becoming unplugged from linear TV. You can now reach a really different audience from, say, the Charity Heartland audience who are sort of on more sort of traditional TV. There's other things you can do to amplify and reach them in different ways. And then there's, the vast array of display suppliers, which I won't even try and tackle now, but there's loads of different things with lots of really interesting different tech from different display suppliers that you can be plugging into your audiences to sort of generate that wider digital awareness across the open web.
Thanks, Megan. Insightful as ever. Is there anyone who wants to come in further on TikTok? If not, I'm going to move us on. All good? Tom?
I'd echo what's been said. Yeah, I think it's I wouldn't go too far into it. I guess the thing for all of those sort of channel decisions for us, it comes down to audience and who you're trying to reach, and having the right product for that audience, as sort of Charlotte and Megan have talked about as well. So I think that's really important for us when we're looking at planning a campaign. We're not just saying, oh, what other channels could we use? We're saying, right, well, this is what we've got. This is who we're speaking to. Where are those people, and what might connect with them in those channels? And it sounds like Charlotte and Megan are doing that in spades, and that's certainly the approach we'd take as well.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate all the questions coming in. This is great. I'm going to save some of these for the end as they feel a bit more generic. Bex, Dementia UK, thank you very much. Going to ask that one first as we get towards the end, and a couple of others as we get further down, one specifically for you there, Tom, and another one aimed at smaller charities. But for now, I'm just going to wrap up around and move on to around that point, on the innovation point, and move on to our panel's predictions for this year. Obviously, the past few years have seen Christmas appeal performance rocked by loads of factors, from pandemic Christmases to the postal strikes in 22, and then, of course, the tightening cost of living crisis. In these unpredictable circumstances, there have been winners and there have been losers. Some charities saw income plummet, but others adapted their fundraising and actually inspired more generosity than ever before. So although I'm pretty sure none of you guys have a crystal ball, I know we've all got views on what's on the cards for this year. Charlotte, I'll start with you, if I may. Over the past few years, homelessness as a cause has become more and more political, right? And crisis has become more and more outspoken. How do you think that the looming general election might influence your Christmas campaign? Are you factoring any other unpredictables into the planning?
Well, for us, we know that the election will probably be happening this autumn. It will almost undoubtedly overlap with the Christmas campaign, and that provides real opportunity for us for a couple of reasons. One is that our campaigns team will be shouting loudly, so that should help amplify the voice of crisis and as a brand, what we do beyond just Christmas. So that should really help. We also had the opportunity this year to jump off the back of a small political moment when Suella Braverman talked about her views of homelessness, we couldn't remain silent. As a homelessness sector, we all spoke up, and we got a very quick reactive ad out within about a day, talking about how homelessness is not a lifestyle choice. That ad performed brilliantly. I think it was our top performing ad of November. And we know that a large set of our audience really care about those political views and us speaking up and being a voice for people experiencing homelessness. So not only was that ad really successful, it also helped us reach new donors as well, some slightly younger donors across Meta. So we know that there's going to be an opportunity to be part of the election conversation through our Christmas campaign. So that's something that we're able to prepare for. And there may be some charities on this call that don't feel that that's going to be quite the right platform for them. It might be that perhaps they receive more government funding than Crisis does, or that it doesn't align with their messaging, in which case you can always create your own moments. It's a very unpredictable world out there at the moment, but you can start to think about what PR moments you might be able to run off. For us, 2 years ago, we put a big statue out in front of King's Cross Station to create a real buzz, and we did see an uplift in awareness of crisis and awareness of homelessness. So we were able to use that to elevate the campaign.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, I know what you mean. It feels like uncertainty is the only certainty. Can I bring you in, Ben, please? What do you think the biggest influences will be on fundraising at Christmas this year?
Yeah, I think, as Charlotte says, I think it's just being about super aware of where your audience is at right now, and also, I guess, how tired they probably are. I was thinking as we were prepping for this, I was at Save the Children in 2016, and we were talking then about crisis fatigue and people switching off because they felt exhausted and they felt powerless. And since then, it's not really been quiet, has it? And I guess the real reflection there is that stuff just feels like it's getting closer and closer to home all the time, and that makes things feel even more overwhelming. Potential change in UK government, that might lead to an optimism bounce. I certainly hope it does. But there are loads and loads of people around the country that are going to be facing uncertain times, and many of our supporters are part of that, and we need to be really mindful of that in the way that we frame our asks. In terms of practical advice around this, I think I'd say 3 things. Going back to the points that we were talking about around the way that British Red Cross has done things over the past couple of years, really focusing on what you can legitimately ask for and what solutions you can legitimately offer. There's sometimes a bit of a temptation to try to attach yourself to a moment, but if you overpromise, you risk overshooting, and that creates all sorts of problems. So essentially, all of those things around honest reasons to give, it's never going to go out of fashion. The second thing is economic uncertainty. It's going to make it harder for some people to give, but it can also bring people closer to a cause. I think that we're seeing more and more that people are feeling that empathy because they are feeling this there, but for the grace of God go I, and there's something really interesting to explore around that. And then finally, it sounds a little bit callous, but I think difficult times do also present other opportunities too. We've learned in previous recessions that while many people are struggling, not everybody is, and there's almost a compulsion to be more generous if you're one of the ones who's coming out of it quite well. So charities, if you do have the data, use it to focus on those higher value segments and how you can bring those people closer to your cause as well.
Thanks, Ben. Tom, point from you, please, if that's okay. The British Red Cross, as an emergency response organisation, is hardwired to react to the unpredicted. So how are you approaching something more planned like Christmas this year? Have you adapted your fundraising accordingly to changing circumstances? You touched on this in the first question a little, but how are you reacting to this?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways for the Red Cross that we've done it. So I think one is how we've pivoted most of what we're talking about publicly to be about our emergency response and the work that the Red Cross does in disasters. So we've done that right from our sort of brand proposition through then into our fundraising as well, and that is really the starting point for our campaigns. So that just puts us in a position that we're talking about our response, and then if something does happen that's unpredicted, well, we're talking about our ability to respond anyway. So we might not have planned to talk about a specific thing that's happened in the future because we didn't know it was going to happen, but we've already built a campaign around how we're there to respond and to help people. So that really enables us then to flex into those different things when they do happen. I think part of that, and I think this responds to one of the questions as well, is how we've changed our processes internally to be able to meet those needs. So we have really shortened our deadlines or our time between confirming what the our print deadlines, for example. So we've really shortened when we sign off final copy and creative to when it gets printed across a range of things that we put out there, from our mailings, our door drops, etc. And we've worked hard with our suppliers to do that. We can of course do that in other channels as well. It's more easy to be flexible around digital. We can do it on TV as well. So that's something we've done so that we can have a plan, and we'll go ahead with a plan and start, but we are open to that changing, and everyone's on board with the fact that the thing we're trying to do is be the most relevant. And if something else happens that means we need to change, we all understand that's why we're changing. So I think it's just that mindset that we've got, that is how we approach our fundraising essentially. And and no one feels burdened if we do make that decision at the last minute that actually this needs a rewrite. It's often not that. It's often actually we need to acknowledge this thing that's going on, or we need to change it this way. I think as well then in terms of how we react to maybe more political things. I mean, as an organization that's neutral, and that's one of our core values, that doesn't mean we can't speak out when things happen that are really also core to our values. If it's about humanity, that's something that we can stand up for. But one of the things we really focus on doing is listening to our audience and getting feedback on when we do that, or we listen to people might be telling us, like, why aren't you speaking about this? And then that kind of gives us a reason to respond.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. And Megan, I'd love to hear your thoughts here. What predictions does the Kite Factory have for Christmas this year? What are you seeing and preparing for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of what we're preparing for is already me mentioned. You've got the climate, you've got oversaturation of the market, crisis fatigue. All of this is things that we're taking into account. If you look at it as sort of a purely digital lens, and something that's not been mentioned yet is that we're really focusing in on the depreciation of cookies. And this is something that is going to be affecting pretty much everything in the marketing landscape. Google's been threatening to do it for quite a while. So they actually originally were going to do it in 2022. We are now planning for it to be this year, just to ensure that everything is in place and we make sure that we've got cookieless solutions there. I think there's sometimes a misconception that it's just going to affect digital, but as digital is one of the most directly attributable channels, it's actually going to have a marked impact on all campaigns. Even if you're doing things like measuring your TV Adalizer, is going to affect what comes through on your TV campaign. So it's going to have a huge effect on everything, which is what we're currently actively planning for. We're looking at cookieless solutions. We're looking at measurement alternatives. We're looking at how we can make sure that we can plan our campaigns as effectively as possible amidst this huge measurement change, which is going to take place across Google Chrome probably this year. So that's a really large thing that we're focusing on in conjunction with all of our clients. And then other things that we're looking at is also like general cost inflation. We keep seeing this with the cost of living crisis across the majority of channels. So in line with that, it's sort of how do you make your media work more effectively for you alongside these cost inflations? How do you diversify your channels with measurement solutions because of the depreciation of cookies, as well as all those external market factors and sort of just human factors that are going to play into campaigns this year? So So there's an awful lot going on and there's a lot of uncertainty, as we've already said, but those are kind of the key things that we're looking at in terms of what can we do to make Christmas 24 as effective as possible.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I asked you guys what you thought was on the cards. I didn't think we'd get that many cards. It's a good job this has been recorded. Thanks very much. A quick glance at the time tells me at this point we should probably move on to questions from our audience because we've got a few, which is great. Thank you, panel, but also a big thank you to everyone who has asked a question. Do keep them coming. We'll get through as many of these as we can. We're going to start with one from Bex at Dementia UK. Which team leads on overall appeal messaging at Crisis and BRC, I guess? And how do you implement cross-team and cross-channel cohesion across the appeal and in months leading up to it when teams have different planned activity? Charlotte, would you like to kick off with
That's a
you?
great question. Yeah, it's something we do quite successfully at Christmas because Crisis at Christmas is such a well-oiled machine. So we have a central proposition, the Life Beyond Homelessness, and we build a big talk. We work with our creative agencies to have a toolkit, imagery, messaging that goes out to the whole organisation so that we're aligned across fundraising, but also volunteering, campaigns, retail, all those kind of touch points. That is a model that we're hoping to now start replicating year round. We really want to be talking more as one organisation the whole year round. We want to start really building the year round Crisis brand. So we've just had a bit of a restructure. There's an audience team being formed as we speak, and we're looking at how we can build a couple of other moments throughout the year with toolkits to help support everybody work off one key message to tell our audiences a bit more what we do outside of Christmas, and to speak with a bigger voice.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And Tom, how about a BRC?
Yeah, I'd say it's still an evolution for us, and we've tried different ways of doing that through the last few years. But some of the core things that have really helped is us starting with brand and fundraising, working together to work on that sort of overarching message, if you like, and where we've really landed with our focus on disasters and emergencies has really helped that. And then as we work through, we tend to work in a working group that pulls in the key heads from different different areas of fundraising and different teams to work together on building that. And then we've worked with partners like Consider and other agencies then, and we'll work together to kind of come up with what that proposition is. So it's not necessarily like one team driving everything. It's we try and work as collectively as possible.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. Some great answers. Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks, Charlotte. Difficult to know what to choose. Okay, this is a good one. As BRC and Crisis are predominantly well-known and recognised charities, what advice would you give for a smaller but rapidly growing charity around Christmas when it's been such a busy fundraising time? Ben, did you want to pop in on this one?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. That I think it's essentially a brand challenge, isn't it? What is it that you do that nobody else is doing that means that at a really busy time of the year, you have a real right to stand out? One of the things that we talk about a bit when it comes to unpicking this kind of stuff is getting to the heart of what is either the unique tragedy of your cause, what is it about what you do that is especially sad and that connects with people on that deep human level, or what is the unique promise of your cause? What is the thing that you're doing that nobody else is doing at the moment that means that at this really busy time of year, people should be giving to you rather than to anybody else? So yeah, I think this is the point that I find really fascinating, is where brand and fundraising intersect. I think that's where the really, really good stuff is, but really good question.
Megan, did you have a view on that as well?
Yeah, I do. I guess also something I'd add on that is like be really specific about your audience. You know, if you are a smaller charity and you've not got as much to play with as larger charities, going broad might not be the best thing for you in terms of that machine learning we were talking about. Have you got, you know, specific audiences that you want to be going against? Have you mapped them out? Have you sort of assessed who you want to get with what cause? And I think that probably is a better starting point, is going, actually, these are the core people I want to reach. Have I tested how that works? And then scale up from there. So, you know, things like being really specific about what audiences are on what channels. You know, Snapchat, for example, isn't usually a standard channel, but if your audience is there, that's an opportunity for you to diversify and make your voice known. So it's about that cut through. I completely agree with what Ben said, but from a media perspective as well, it's what channel cut through, what audience cut through can I get to make sure I'm showing myself to the right people amidst, you know, all this other stuff that's going on.
Thanks, Megan. Tom, Charlotte, finally, do you have any points or advice for like smaller orgs?
I think just, yeah, creative brilliance, having real standouts. So having a really clear proposition, having really strong creative to stand out, because it's a crowded market. And even as a bigger organisation with, you know, very good awareness, it's very easy to fall into that sea of sameness if you don't invest in your creative and your proposition. And like Megan said, really knowing who your audience are and where to find them.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on to another question. Yeah, this is a good one, and yeah, I thought it would come up. How do you approach picking your hero story for the campaign and market ad creation? Yeah, that's a big one. Ben, you mentioned emotional connectivity earlier on, but Tom, how do you choose? How does British Red Cross? How do you choose the hero story for the Christmas appeal?
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily have one hero story across our campaigns. I think where we start, and think, as Ben's talked through, is often from what's the operational truth and what's the need, you know, for the Red Cross at this time, and then we'll use that as a platform across what we're doing. So we won't necessarily then have one story that tells that sort of speaks to that. We might have a number of different stories. It might come from a number of different perspectives. So in Christmas last year, for example, we had Ben's talked about, we had a real focus on how the impact of the cost of living was really impacting our ability to deliver our services. So we had an appeal from our chief finance officer, you know, but at the same time, in other creative, we did have then a more of a personal human story of like someone who's being impacted by the cost of living and the services that we're bringing for them. So I think it's those two things. It's more tapping into less choosing that sort of hero story. It's more what is the reason to give, and then we start from there and then move to looking to, well, how do we illustrate that?
I guess the thing there is, what's the big story that we need to tell? And then what are the smaller stories that help to bring that to life? One thing that I've sometimes found, though, is by looking at the smaller stories that you can start to identify the themes that will help you bring the big story to life. And I'm aware that I've said story way too many times in that sentence. I hope everybody's still with me.
It was part of the question. You're all right. Right. Thank you very much. This is one certainly for Tom and Charlotte. How were income results for Christmas results? How were income results for Christmas this year? 23, I'm guessing. Lots are reporting a shortfall on targets. Was this felt for Crisis and British Red Cross as well? Should we be pushing back more to realistic targets in a recession? Obviously, costs are still there and rising. Such a hard call. Yes, it is. Thanks for that question. That's good. Who would like to dive in on that first?
I can take that.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, so we saw huge growth in the lead up to COVID, and then cost of living crisis hit, you know, things changed, and we are now seeing a very slow decline. So year on year, our target tends to remain the same, has done for the 3 Christmases that I've been at Crisis. And we've worked really hard with our creative and media agencies to stem that decline. So for the first 2 Christmases, there was -7%. This year it's -3%. So we're getting really close to stemming that. That's through the product diversification, that's through audience diversifications. That's also looking at our whole income mix, so not just individual giving, but looking at philanthropy. We've seen huge growth this year. I don't have the numbers to hand, but they've absolutely smashed targets this year. We're also working really hard with our corporate partnerships to bring in extra income there. And we also have our champions who are kind of between individual giving and philanthropy, and we're seeing real success there as well. So it's diversifying across as much as we can so that we're a lot less reliant on individual giving at Christmas on that singular product.
Thanks, Charlotte. Tom, how about yourself? How was Christmas last year at British Red Cross?
Yeah, I mean, results were very good for us. I think there was a lot of focus on the work that the Red Cross were doing. We went into, like, in September, there was a large earthquake in Morocco, and then the flooding in Libya, where we responded and had large emergency appeals. And then we went into sort of October and, you know, continue with a huge crisis in the Middle East that we're, you know, really strongly associated with. We've got, you know, a big response there from the Red Cross movement. So it's hard to translate that across to lots of other organizations, right? You know, it's somewhat unique to the Red Cross, and that has had a big impact. But I think it talks back to what Megan was talking about in terms of that modeling, because we see most of our income now coming in online, and it isn't directly tracked back to a specific thing. So we do really need to have that wider perspective on what's driving our income, and, you know, that does mean looking out across, you know, PR, where we're working with celebrities and influencers as well. You know, the stuff we're doing on our organic channels, and then what we're doing through our marketing as well, like, and trying to work out what's driving it and where can we drive improvements.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to? Megan, did you have a point of view, or should I move on?
No, I think Charlotte's pretty much covered that. I think it's, yeah, my only thing would be is like that you see a real disparity in terms of what kind of charity you are. As we've just heard, it can really differ based on what your cause is, how relevant your cause is, you know, everything essentially. So yeah, I'd say my perspective, having seen a few different results, is there's no one size fits all. It's where are you now and what can you do to push yourself forward and grow moving into this year and the year after.
Thank you. I'm going to stick with you, if that's okay, to pick up on this next question. Thank you again for the question. If you could only run your Christmas appeals across 3 channels, which would you choose and why? Most successful channels for Crisis at Christmas.
Ooh, that's a hard one, because I don't think I'd want to do it across only 3 channels if I had the choice. I guess it depends what you're looking for, right? Are you looking for those direct donations that we're talking for at Christmas? Are you looking for brand building? And it will massively change based on which ones. There are your below the line ones, and I'm not going to say that I recommend 3 channels because I can't, but I'm going to say what's good for what, essentially. So if you're looking at below the line, you're going to be looking at digital channels, right? Because at the moment, those are the ones that you can attribute. But I would say that you're going to things like Meta, PPC, etc. Those are where you're going to see objective, like the attributable donations. So if you're looking for that, that is what you want to be doing. But massive caveats, you're not going to have brand growth, you're not going to have, you know, the larger stuff filtering down into PPC. So if you run a PPC on a campaign on its own, you're not going to see it perform if you were running a cross-channel campaign, because the awareness isn't being built elsewhere for people to know to search for you and to want to search for you. But the attributable stuff will come through those campaigns. If you're looking for big brand stuff, you know, again, there's things like it's more these sort of the traditional medias, but also, so you've got TV, out of home, but then you've also got things like YouTube, which are really big now and can be fantastic for brand building. We've seen really big success on some really outstanding brand lift for Crisis last Christmas on YouTube. And then other things like that are your bigger brand builders. But again, if you run those in isolation, you're not going to be harvesting back anything direct. So those are what they're kind of all good for, but I can't in good conscience say only run 3.
Thanks, Meg. You're properly on the spot there. Would anyone else like to answer with a host of caveats as well? Which
I need to press Megan. I just want to press Megan. She has to choose 3, I think.
Tom, Charlotte, would you like to wade in on that one? If you had to,
I mean, I'm with Megan, I'm a digital girl. But I guess for smaller charities with smaller budgets, you know, things like TV might be out of reach, in which case they might want to, think about things like social that works at quite across the channel. You can use that for brand and direct response. Same with display, you can use that to drive PPC. I don't know costs of print and out of home as well as I know digital, so unable to comment on those as much, but Tom, maybe you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's the horrible brief you never really want to get, isn't it, Megan? I guess that. But I think 2 things. One is, I guess, if just sort of leaning into what Megan was saying, if you're trying some things and trying to make a case for what you should do in the future, having a way to measure it and work out what drove the performance is super useful. So I'd definitely think about that when you're doing it. You know, out of home, for example, you're going to really struggle to work out how much that's driven unless you've got like a direct response on there. You know, if a lot of it's coming in online, it can be challenging without a bigger sort of econometric modeling program. So I'd really think about measurement and how you're going to sort of grow it in the future. I'd also then think, if you're thinking about constrained budgets and then channels, I'd go back to thinking about creative. And I think it's a point that Charlotte made, is that is just so important for driving the for driving response. So it's almost bringing it back to that and saying, well, if I'm constrained here, like where should I be putting most of my investment? Do I add another channel? Do I do more media? Or do I actually think a bit more about the creative side of things and think about other ways I might be able to get that out there, maybe through some of your partners, maybe through, you know, your organic channels. That's not saying don't spend anything on media, but it's just making sure you got that right balance.
I think the partnership piece is really interesting for me as well, particularly if you're looking at that brand challenge. I know that TV ads are really kind of exciting and fun, and out of home is really, really big, but there's something really interesting about working with ambassadors and building up partnerships and even PR stories that can land your brand in places where maybe it wouldn't normally be seen for minimal cost. And I think that's something worth exploring as well.
Thank you all very much. That's great. I reckon we've got time for 1, maybe 2 more questions. Let's take this one from Emma. Thank you for the question, Emma. We're having discussions at the moment about how much to lean into Christmas, given our organisation's desire to broaden our reach and be more inclusive. How do you approach being inclusive when we know that the festive period is such a driver for giving? We did touch on this one a little bit earlier on, but would anyone like to go in first on that? Charlotte, how are you fixed? Do you have
I'm going to try and think of something clever to say. Obviously, we know at Christmas, like that is the time when gifting spikes. We run a year-round digital program. We, absolutely, we don't spend anywhere near as much year-round as we do at Christmas, but we do see lots of green shoots at other times of year. So it might be that you look at an always-on program. We know that contextual ads work particularly well. So if you want to diversify away from Christmas and reach other groups, you need to, do it the right way, but think about what other moments throughout the calendar year you can capitalize on. Christmas works particularly well because even though it's that one day, we talk about it from October to December, so we've got plenty of time to build up the campaign learn, and by December we're, you know, running our best creative in the best places, in the best way possible. Where we've struggled a bit more is on singular days, like maybe Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, and if you invest so much in creative and it only runs for a day or a couple of days, that's where it can be a bit more difficult. So just think about look at your calendar, think about those moments, and perhaps just pick 2 or 3 throughout the year that you could put together a campaign to reach other diverse audiences.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Would anyone else like to comment on that one? Driving inclusivity.
I could just touch on it. I mean, I think one of the things is really just about understanding the audiences that you want to engage. So, you know, finding ways to reach out and speak to the different audiences that you want to engage, and find out, you know, what would work for them. And I think that's always really important. You know, mentioned a few different ways we do that. I mean, you know, we've got a large organization, so we can bring in lots of different perspectives from internally in the organization, but also go out to our existing supporters, or use commercial services to reach out to other people. So there's organizations that can help with that as well, certainly. So that's just one of the angles that I'd take on it.
Thanks very much, Tom. I'm going to squeeze in a real last quick one here about in-mem supporters. Do you think that would be a risky move, including targeting in-mem supporters at Christmas? We don't want to ignore our non-in-mem donors, but the in-mem supporters make up a third of our charity base. Any advice for that idea? Megan, would you like to have a view on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a tricky one. I guess a lot of people here will be familiar with the charity product conundrum, is that you've got lots of different things and lots of different products, and you know, there's different times of the year where one needs more of a spotlight and others don't. So it's very much sort of playing into that, isn't it? And it's the constant sort of question for charities. I guess it's what you want to achieve, right? If you want to have that in-memory supporter as its own thing, and it needs to be isolated, then it's probably got to stay that way. But if you are happy to sort of give them different messages, you can. I think the key thing there is probably just keeping it consistent with look, feel, making sure that the brand is really front and center and they know that it's still coming from you. That's a really key part if you're going to start doing product overlaps. Also sort of just tying into kind of general audience work as well, just making sure that everything's really clear, and that you're just keeping a really solid path through, I guess, is probably what I would say in relation to that.
Thanks, Megan. Tom, Charlotte, as a last point of view, would either of you two like to share anything on around in-mem supporters at Christmas?
I think it really depends on your cause, and if you've got a particular product for those people. You know, there's a couple of charities that I support in MEM for a family member, and when it's done well, it's done really, really well. And a lot of those people very much want to give to those causes that have been part of that journey. So yeah, it's coming up with the right product and the right offering to that group, and then absolutely speaking to them directly.
Thank you. And I think that is where we'll leave it. A huge thank you to you all on the panel for such a great and insightful discussion today. There's a lot to take away, and it's really been my pleasure to listen to you all. And also a big thank you to you all for taking the time to join the conversation today. We'll follow up with a link to the recording of today's session. And if you've got a sec, please do leave feedback on that screen that comes up next when the Zoom call ends. We'd all love to know your thoughts. You're very welcome. There's lots of nice things being said and lots of thank yous. Thank you to you all again. Any other questions, please do drop me a line. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Bye-bye for now.